Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. Speaker Saiki, why don't we start with you on what's top of mind for you and your chamber in the House with the 2023 session?
Okay, thanks, Chad. Thanks to Civil B for sponsoring this forum. As we were just talking before we started, this is the first
first time since COVID for me.
So congratulations. It's great. It's great.
I don't miss Zoom. I don't know about you guys, but I'm zoomed out. So
I just love to see Chad in person. So that's I'm really happy today. But yeah, so I'll just give you a brief overview of the House dynamics. This is like insider stuff maybe, but as you know, we have new members this year. We have 16 brand new House freshmen. There are going to be 2 more appointed probably in the next few weeks. So we'll have a total of 18 freshmen out of 51 members. It's a diverse group of people from throughout the state. I'm really excited about working with them because each and every one of those members, and I wasn't anticipating this, but after I've met them over the past few weeks since the election, each of them is like they're so committed to their communities, to the entire state, and they are very substantive. They have ideas, they have enthusiasm. They are just so happy to be here in the House, in the legislature. So I'm looking forward to working with them because they all want to make a difference. So along with the change in membership, we also had a change with our committee chairs. So as you know, in the House, we have 18 House committees, and 10 of those committees are going to be chaired by new House members. So there was a change not only at the freshman level, but there's also a change in our committee structure, including the top 3 committees, Finance, Judiciary, and Consumer Protection. We have new chairs in those slots. This is the year of the Neighbor Islander in the House because we have in our leadership and as well as in our committee chairs, it's predominantly comprised of Neighbor Island members. So I'm like the only Oahu person really in the mix, but the top 3 leadership positions are held by Neighbor Island members. Representative Ilagan from the Big Island is Vice Speaker. Rep. Nady Nakamura is the Majority Leader from Kauai, and Rep. D. Morikawa is the Floor Leader from Kauai. Our Finance Chair is from Maui, Rep. Kyle Yamashita. Our Consumer Protection Chair is Representative Mark Nakashima from the Big Island. And our Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Chair is Representative David Tarnas from the Big Island. So it's probably the first time in modern history that we've had such a dominant Neighbor Island presence at that level. So as you know, we started session last Wednesday. We are scheduled to end our session on Thursday, May 4th. And what's most important is that, working with the Senate President, we were able to reopen the Capitol for this legislative session. I think that members are pretty excited about that. It's a different sort of energy this year. And we're also going to be continuing our hybrid system for public participation at our committee hearings. So members of the public have an opportunity to testify or to attend committee hearings either in person or through our YouTube system. So we're going to continue that hybrid system. So as far as issues going forward, I know that the Senate President probably has a lot to say about those as well. But on opening day, we did discuss. I did discuss some issues in my opening day speech. So there are some carryover issues that we're going to continue to focus on this year. One is Red Hill. Last year, the House did form a working group committee that helped to work to oversee the defueling and decommissioning plans that the Navy was working on. So we're going to continue that oversight committee. We also approved last year $600 million for the Department of Homelands to build housing. We're going to form a committee to oversee the formulation and the implementation of that plan. So I want to make sure that the funds are leveraged and maximized so that we can build as many units as possible. And the third carryover issue is affordable housing. Last year, the legislature appropriated $300 million to help finance affordable housing development, including $150 million for the lowest, some of the lower income bracket levels. And over the summer, all of those funds were allocated. They were allotted for specific projects, so the funds need to be replenished, and that's something that we're hoping to do this year. Going forward, there's some new issues that we'll be focusing on. One is the issue of tax relief has come up again. The governor mentioned it as well in the State of the State address. I think that there will be some good work between the governor and the Senate and the House to see how we can provide more tax relief to the families, especially working families that need assistance. These are what's called also as the Alice families, and we want to see how we can provide more relief for those families. Renewable energy is another topic that was discussed over the past week. I feel that with our budget surplus, that we should really take advantage of some unmet needs, and renewable energy development is one of those areas. As you know, we have a 2045 deadline to reach our 100% renewable mandate, and I feel that we should do everything possible to incentivize people and businesses to help us reach that goal. I would like to see us help fund more PV systems and rooftop solar systems, because I feel that's the easiest way to get people involved to help us reach that goal. And then there's also, as you know, a homeless situation in our state that needs to be addressed. So homeless combined with mental health issues. This is an area that the House will be working on. It's easier said than done. This is a really complex area. We have a new health chair, Representative Della Bellotti, who is gonna just focus in on how we can better streamline and provide intervention and diversion type services for those with mental health needs. So that will be an ongoing project for us. So those are that's just an overview, and I know there are a lot of questions, and I know the Senate President has more to say than I do, so I will just turn it over to the Prez. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Civil Beat, and to all of you who are here today. I guess the easiest way is to start on what I possibly might not agree with the Speaker on. I usually get covered by Blaze, so I don't know that I'm all that happy to see Chad Blair. And I'll let you know at the end of the program if I'm going to agree with the Speaker's opening remark or if we're going to have a disagreement over that.
Should we switch seats?
And then to the students from Kamehameha Schools, for the Senate's opening ceremony, we had the halau perform hula, but the hula was about the forests and the land, the ocean, and in our discussion on climate change was very meaningful and incredible job. We had the Kamehameha Schools Glee Club perform, and for our opening contemplation, we had 15-year-old Ms. Wong give the contemplation, and she was incredible. She had a great message, and then most importantly, with the packed gallery, her delivery was awesome. And so we were happy to have your participation. I know students visit all of the offices on opening day as well. I had several of the Kauai students who were at Kamehameha Schools visit me, and so I think it's fantastic the way that you have the students engaged in the government process and learn about what we do here, and certainly expect to see future leaders coming from Kamehameha Schools with the way that you engage your students. Essentially, I agree with the speaker, on those issues. The other one that he and I agree on, and I would phrase it a little differently, is that I'm not necessarily going to use the term tax reform, because there may be ways that we can get money into the hands of the Alice families who we most directly want to help, that may be in other kind of payments that don't take tax reform, but we are committed at looking to help the same group of people, and we're trying to do it in a way that's going to make sense for the long term. The speaker and I, when we've appeared, have said clearly that we have a one-time windfall. And so for people who want to invest in cost that is going to be ongoing, we have no guarantee that we'd have the revenue stream to sustain that in the long run. So we need to be careful how we use the money. But I think that's why we've talked a lot about the investment in infrastructure, the investment in housing. Those are all one-time, non-recurring costs. And to just drill down a little bit on the renewable energy part. So I had a visit with the superintendent, Keith Hayashi, and his team a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things they're going to be asking us for is an additional appropriation because of their increased utility bills. And in particular, the increased utility cost here on Oahu that they did not anticipate. And so I wholeheartedly agree with the speaker about solar on rooftops. And one of the first places I'd like to see it go is in our DOE schools. We have put a level of solar on rooftops across the state in the DOE, but obviously we've not put enough. And then ironically, one of the ways that we could save on energy costs is to have more farm fresh, locally sourced food served to our children when they go to school. Right now, a lot of the food is processed, and they use freezer space to freeze chicken fingers and pizza, and then they open cans to serve chili. And if we are able to locally source more fresh food and we need less freezer space, we would be consuming less electricity, and the savings would offset what we would be paying for putting fresh food on the plates of our school students, and then at the same time working with the state hospitals and the state prisons. And we can make that difference in doubling the agricultural production here in the state of Hawaii and have better food security and certainly better health outcomes for our students. But there was a friendly wager in my office, and apparently whoever went over 22 minutes was the winner. And so I talked a lot last Wednesday, and the top of my mind, the bottom of my mind, and left and right of my mind was expressed. So I'm going to stop right now, and then we'll just deal with the questions that you have.
Thank you to both leaders. I do have a couple of quick follow-ups before we get into the formal questions. But ladies, I want to give you the first shot at what you just heard from the speaker and the president.
Yes, Speaker, I actually am curious to know what's your opinion of the current DHHL spending plan that the commission approved last year for the $600 million. It's devoting a lot of money to lot development, but not necessarily building housing units. And it seems the new governor really wants to build new housing units. Given that you're proposing this new, I guess, committee to oversee the funds, what do you think of the current plan?
Yes, I guess the DHHL is going to kind of revisit the plan that they submitted to us. I think we have to kind of view the plan from the perspective of HHL beneficiaries and what would beneficiaries want. Do they all want a homestead? Do they all want agricultural type farms? Do some of them want to live in vertical buildings? Do some of them want to rent rather than own? I think in this modern day, you probably have beneficiaries who want some of all of this. And so I was hoping that the DHHL would come up with a plan that would provide different kinds of options and not just focus in on lot development. I also had hoped that the plan would discuss ways that the funds could be leveraged so that we could maximize the use of the $600 million, rather than just spend it all down at once. How can you leverage it to bring in more funds and more units for beneficiaries? So I think there's a lot of room, and it's something that, I mentioned publicly that we would work with HHL to help to refine that plan.
And I'm curious to know from both of you, do you think the legislature would support extending the deadline they have to spend that money down? There seems to have been some sort of constitutional issue with the way the deadline was written in the original bill, and the department seems to believe that they don't actually have until 2025 to spend the money. They believe they have until June of next year to spend all of that or encumber all of those funds. Do you think an extension is on the horizon, Senate President?
Well, I think what would help them is to have a plan that shows how, with the extension, they would encumber all of the money by 2025, which was what the intent was. If they're just going to come and say we need an extension, I really think that they're not going to be very successful. We want to understand what the plan is and be assured that those who have been on the waiting list for generations are going to get assistance in a timely fashion. And then I'll just quickly add on the leveraging the speaker talked about. Back in about 2007, when I was on the Kauai County Council, Mike Akani, the then head of DHHL, made the case that 25% of developers' affordable housing condition could be met by producing homes on Hawaiian homelands, and they had land available but not much capital. When we did a survey of the affordable housing list for the county of Kauai, 25% of those on the list were Native Hawaiians. And so we felt that that would be an appropriate thing to do. No one has used it yet, but now that DHHL has the financial resources to get to one level, say it's lots, but now maybe we have some developers who are on Kauai and would like to come in and partner with DHHL and provide that additional capital to make sure that the beneficiaries can get those homes, and the homes are in a cost range that we're trying to achieve.
President Kouchi, I wanted to ask you something. The media had reported some.
The speaker didn't get his chance to answer.
Oh, he will. Did you want to have a follow? Okay. There were reports in Civil Beat, Star Advertiser, I would imagine some of the TV stations. Josh Green, the governor, comes out with $100 million for climate change, and then maybe there's going to be a GE tax exemption for food and medicine, and then there's reports from you folks appearing on Spotlight saying, well, hold on a minute, and then suddenly the report is they're already fighting. The House and Senate leaders are disagreeing with the governor, and then on opening day, it's sort of a kumbaya moment and so forth. I'm wondering, does the media distort that? Do we get that wrong when we are saying they're already fighting? I wonder if you respond to that.
Sure, you absolutely get that wrong because you're trying to sell a subscription or papers, so conflict sells and peace and harmony is not so exciting. Just simply on the green fee, the speaker and I talked about getting the money from a visitor. The governor's plan talks about getting the money from the visitor. We are in 100% agreement. Now let's figure out the best way to do it. So I've been getting emails from individuals who've read my comments to tell me how badly I've got it and what I am thinking is all wrong because we should charge it at the airport. And look at Fiji. And I keep writing back and saying, everybody who's got a green fee in the world is a nation. And so it is a national policy, and they can decide how to spend their money how they want to in their nation. We are a state and a political subdivision of the United States of America. And the FAA out of Washington, D.C. regulates airports, and all fees collected at airports needs to be spent on the airport or within a mile radius so you could improve some of the roads and other things leading up to the airport. So if we collected it at the airport, we're absolutely not going to get it to the Kalalau Trail on Kauai or Diamond Head and Wainapanapa and all of the parks across the state where we want that investment to go. And so we need to find the mousetrap that works. And then in one of the latest bills, they talk about having DLNR collecting that fee, but that's not DLNR's mission. So is that the appropriate place? I'm open to having the conversation and looking at what we can do. And we've got to figure out the details. But on the housing, mental health services, pre-K, and the climate change, as you heard, Kauai, if we get that permit approved for the pump storage in West Kauai, we will be 90% renewable to the grid by 2025.
Great.
Speaker, you want to comment on whether the media distorts the tensions or lack thereof between the fifth floor and those below?
Okay, so I love the First Amendment and I love the media. And I'm trying to think back to the conversation that we had, and this was on Spotlight with the advertiser, where one of the questions was our position on tax relief. And the governor had mentioned previously that he was going to support an exemption, GET exemption on food and medical services. And I think my comment was, and probably similar to the president's, was that, the House, we always want to provide targeted relief, right, for those who are in need, and there might be different ways of approaching that. And then I think that was kind of one of the basis for the media then reporting that we were in conflict with the governor. But if you take it to the flip side, if the president and I had said, "Oh yeah, we totally agree with this plan to exempt food and medical services from the GET," we support the governor. I mean, the headline would have been, "Are they all in cahoots? Is this all predetermined? Is the public going to be able to weigh in on this on behalf of those who are really in need?" So it flips both ways, right? But since then, the governor, and he's publicly said this, he has rethought his original proposal, and he's no longer really supportive of a GET exemption, and he wants to look at alternative ways of providing relief in a targeted way for those who are in need. So yeah, it was just a First Amendment discussion that was overblown.
The governor, if I recall, then immediately started to backtrack a little bit and so forth, and that became our news story then. Blaze, I do want to turn to you for the first lineup of our questions, and it has to do with taxes.
Yeah, I actually did. You both mentioned it already today. You wanna see targeted relief to the Alice population, asset, limited income, employed, which is like half of this state. But
I think it's nudged up a little over half from the 43 or 47% in 2020. So COVID has definitely had an adverse impact on the Alice individuals in the Alice category.
Right. I'm just wondering, what sorts of relief do you want to see that targets them specifically? The governor's package has some things like, it's upping the food tax credit. He's taking a broad sweep at the tax brackets to lower taxes for almost everybody, but which would also help the Alice population. But I'm curious to know what sort of targeted tax relief measures are you both thinking about?
Well, I think simply if you look at replicating what we did last session with that $300 credit per individual with the families earning under the 100,000 would be one mechanism, looking at the earned income tax credit. Does that need to be increased? Is it right where it's at? Would be a couple of other mechanisms, but it's going to really be, Ways and Means Chair Dela Cruz, Finance Chair Yamashita, the Speaker and I working with the governor to see what the overall financial plan is. And then for those of you who weren't in the media gaggle after the State of the State address, when I was meeting with the press, I did say everything we're assuming today is based on the January Council of Revenues report. The final budget that we will make a decision on is gonna be based on the March report. In the worst case example, in my 12 years here in the legislature, we started January 1 of 2011 at $600 million in the red. And I was crying, lamenting, thinking about all the hard choices we were gonna make. And when the council gave the report in March, and the House gets the budget first, so they were working with that $600 million deficit. And I say, well, poor bunch of people, they gotta deal with that. In March, when we got the budget, the deficit was 1.2 billion. And I called 600 million in the red. I wish those happy days were here again. And the Senate then had to go in and deal with a $1.2 billion deficit. And then the two money chairs got together and worked with the administration on a plan to deal with it. So those are some of the dramatic things that can happen. So these are aspirational, what we're talking about, but the technical details will be fleshed out, and the March report will have a big say in what those final details are.
Speaker, did you want to dovetail
Sure.
on that?
Sure, so, as usual, I agree with what the president just said. And, I would just add one thing, which is that, and this is my opinion, that when we start to work on tax relief, whether it's through exemptions or credits, I kind of prefer a system that's gonna be very simple for the filer. Because, I don't know if everyone knows that they can file for a food credit or a renter's credit or a childcare credit. And that's why I mentioned maybe using the earned income tax credit as a basis this year, which the EITC is more, it's comprehensive. And last year, the legislature did expand the EITC, so I think that's a mechanism that we could hopefully consider once again.
Thank you. This question is to both of you. And by the way, when I'm looking at my phone, it's because it's an internal Slack channel. I get communications from the staff that's in the room here. I'm not just checking my email or anything like that. For both of you, does Hawaii really need a Hawaii Tourism Authority? Does Hawaii really need an Aloha Stadium?
To the stadium, absolutely, I believe we need a stadium. We need an opportunity to host world-class events. It's not just about sports. There's concerts and other activities. When you look across the mainland at other areas that have successfully developed these complexes, we're not being asked to do something from scratch. So I have two sons, and one played soccer and one played baseball. So my wife and I spent quite a bit of time out at the court fields in Waipio, and we had to stay in Waikiki. If there was an evening game, then you had to start at 2:30, and if you waited till after 3:00, you were dead in the traffic, and then we had to go lose more money by walking around the shops at Waikele or finding other things to do. And if there was a hotel out in that area, we would have gladly stayed there. When they opened the Hilton Garden Inn in Kapolei, they're running 95 to 97% occupancies. All of the business traffic that goes through Pearl Harbor, besides youth athletic teams, in synergy with that stadium would be things like that, restaurants and other entertainment opportunities. And then we need to be sure we deliver the affordable housing we promised at the rail stop. And I think that would be a great opportunity. We've had Major League Soccer teams come to talk to us. We've had rugby teams come to talk to us. But you would end 5 and 10K runs at the stadium and take advantage of that. And so I believe that this is something we need, and for our student athletes, to have a place for them to play.
And a comment on HTA before I turn to the speaker on these same questions. Why Tourism Authority?
We're going to
At this point,
What was that look? That was
at this point, I still think that they provide an important function. And I like the fact that the emphasis is now on Malama, Hawaii. And what we've learned through COVID is that if you're going to come back, and now kind of my buzz phrase is, if we're inviting you to be a guest in our house, then treat our house like you would want us to treat your house when we come and visit you. And the messaging that they've been putting out, I think, has been good. I hope we can get this contract behind us and go forward. How much of a responsibility they had as opposed to, the director of DBED at the
The
time.
former director.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know that everything lies at their doorstep, but it's clear to me that with the board members that are there now, they get it, and I think that they're going in a much better direction.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. Speaker, HTA and Aloha Stadium.
Okay, so on HTA, I believe that there is a role for HTA. I mean, whether we like it or not, tourism is still our number one economic driver in our state. And I believe that there should be a centralized agency that handles tourism management issues. I also think that HTA is important because it kind of creates a buffer between the legislature and the administration on how we handle and manage tourism issues. I feel that HTA should have, it should be somewhat independent, it should be somewhat autonomous, because as you can imagine, with an industry like this, there are so many competing interests, there are so many interested parties, and everybody's trying to manage HTA in their own way, which is, to be expected. So you want to give HTA some autonomy there. I'm not sure if how much of the emphasis should be on marketing, because I feel like at this point there are all kinds of ways that Hawaii is already being marketed. I'm not sure if you need additional marketing. And I also don't know if HTA is the agency that should be handling destination management policy and implementation. That might be better left to a department like the Department of Land and Natural Resources, which actually does oversee our parks and trails. So I think there's a lot of, I think HTA is 25 years old maybe, and it's still a young agency. I think it's still kind of going through growing pains, and we need to kind of take a step back and just position it so that it has some independence and clarity on what the purpose is. On the stadium, so I feel like we should have a stadium, but it should not be a 50,000 seat stadium. And most importantly, it should not be a stadium that is gonna become another rail project and end up costing us or taxpayers over $1 billion. We budgeted $350 million for this stadium. That is what we should spend on it, $350 million at the most. I don't believe that the taxpayers of our state can afford another rail project. So that is where I'm coming from on the cost side of it. One of the departments that's trying to take the lead on this, on the development, the Department of Accounting and General Services, has already told us that under their plan, they are already $75 million over budget. $75 million, but I interpret that as probably $150 million over budget. I don't think it's still.
So what's
more than
the total figure? Is it 450, 500 million? Is that-
350 plus 75, so 425.
425.
Right? And so I'm just looking at it mostly from the cost perspective.
And then on the stadium, where I think the speaker is going to play a vital role, education-wise, professional-wise, he's an attorney. I think one of the things we learned from rail is some of those contracts weren't written well. And now you get all of these disputes, and are we on the hook as the taxpayer as opposed to the contractor? What is probably the most important thing if we're going to be successful is that we write a good, solid contract that protects the interests of the people of Hawaii. And when I've worked with the speaker on other projects like this, then he brings a great skill set to, analyze and go through those things. And I see that as really the foundation of success. And if we don't have a good contract written, then we're going to be heading to where the speaker's worried about.
Please.
If I could follow up, Speaker, on HTA, you're saying, you don't think their role is to really market Hawaii anymore, and you don't think that brand management or destination management should be their thing either, that should be held by another state agency, but that's sort of the two things that they've been doing since they were created. What's your thoughts on what they should be doing?
Well, I think the overall mission was is a planning function, and what is the what, especially at this point in time, what is the role of tourism here? What is the future role of tourism here? How do we plan for it? How do we work with all of the interested parties in developing a tourism system, the kind that is appropriate for Hawaii? I think a lot of it is in the planning mode. They also currently operate the convention center, which I think is appropriate.
Should we move on to? Go ahead.
And just to the point that the speaker has made, they've done a great job in engaging communities across the state in those destination management plans. But what we found specifically on Kauai, airports hired a consultant comes out with a report that says we may build enough gates to get 6 million visitors a year to Kauai, and we're just over 1 million today, and the people of Kauai were incredibly upset. But I also pointed out to airports, there's a lot of work that went into the DMAPs. The legislature put it in the statute about wanting to make sure that we were getting feedback from community. And so we need somebody to help coordinate these state agencies so that they would be aware of all of this work and not make decisions in the vacuum, and that we are in concert and, making sure that it's not just visitors that are happy, but the residents are happy as well.
DMAPS refers to the destination management plans. Going to your point about caring for the INA, when people come here and visit us, treat us as we would treat you in your own home. Let's go ahead and move to the last 4 questions if we can, before we then go on to the questions we received from readers. We're about at the halfway mark here. Speaking of Kauai, Mr. President, you're a leader, you're responsible for the whole chamber, you work together, but is there any particular legislation important to your county, to the folks of Kauai, anyhow, that you're championing this year? And then I'm going to ask the same question, or I guess Blaise will ask the same question of the speaker, which I just announced just now. Go ahead.
No, the biggest thing I'm concerned about, not just for Kauai, but the whole state, is the learning loss for the K through 12 students. So the things that I'm working on for the schools on Kauai are for the schools across the state. And then, I was told by Blaise, you kind of rehashed everything you did last time on opening day. Well, what are you going to do forward? But I was saying it's a continuum. So if we get the pre-K, then not only do we get those better educational outcomes for those children, but we relieve those parents of childcare costs. So back to the speaker and my desire to put money back into the working families of Hawaii, it does the two things. The hardest thing to do to retain teachers and to recruit employees in general is affordable housing. So there are specific programs that I'm going to be working on for Kauai, but I make sure that we're investing in affordable housing across the state. And it takes so long to get a project done, so you haven't even really seen the results of the $1 billion+ of last year. But then we got to put the commitment in that we're talking about this year, and then the next year, and then you'll see the houses that are going to come up. But one project in particular is out in the Mana Plain. One of the seed companies left, and they have a building. You can use it as classrooms. They have STEM robotic equipment there, and Waimea High School is looking to take that building over. The DOE is hopefully gonna finalize the purchase on this 10-acre property, and the principal envisions having a lo'i on this 10 acres. And so teaching students cultural practicing the traditional farming of Hawaii to 21st century STEM, robotic agriculture, and then there is a foundation that's there with electric and plumbing stub outs. We hope to get to the point of putting in a processing facility, and then the Agribusiness Development Corporation has several lessees, and we can do the value added work, and then we can train students and get them ready, hopefully, to be interested in an agricultural career. Each of the 3 high schools to do this had a philanthropic donation, so they have a 15-passenger van so that the principal can make sure that the students can get from Waimea High School, drive the 10, 15 minutes to get to this facility in Mana. She's envisioning in automotive that 3 days a week they're in traditional class, 2 days a week they drive to Hanapepe and work in an automotive shop. And so when they graduate from high school, they'll be job ready. And I think that's been a big thing from Ways and Means Chair De La Cruz, is getting students not into an academy with a piece of paper to put on the wall, but when you get done with the academy, you have something that says you are employable and you will go into a job if that's what you want to do.
Okay, before we hear from the speaker in his district, we're gonna follow up, please, on pre-K.
Yeah, last year the legislature appropriated $200 million to this new authority to develop all our classrooms. Now the lieutenant governor, the former House Finance Chair, is overseeing this effort. Do you think that work will really get done on this finally?
Yeah, I think so. I think for those of you who know the lieutenant governor and have worked with her, she's really just a bulldog, I guess. She's very as finance chair a couple of years ago, she kind of latched onto the preschool issue, and that's why it's one of her primary focuses now as lieutenant governor. She wants to implement the system. She unveiled, her plan about a week ago, and it's pretty, it has a participation of not just public sector, but also private sector and the nonprofit sector, and there's definite benchmarks built into it, but there is a plan in place, and it looks realistic, and I think we're also fortunate because of the budget surplus we've seen over the last year and going into this coming year, that really that's gonna help to fund this program.
And I think when the speaker refers to benchmarks, it doesn't have as much play in the media, but she had philanthropic dollars donated to create a website and tracking system. So she's put up a report card that you will be able to easily grade her if she's meeting her timelines. Is she going to be successful? And with that, then we're able to say, where are we falling short? What do we need to do to pick it up? And if we're excelling in a particular area, what are we doing right so we can replicate that? Most of the time, we've talked about big plans and they've been in generalities. And when they've failed, there was nothing to look at other than, it was just overwhelming. And I think putting this tracking system up is something that may help this succeed.
Your district, Ala Moana, Kaka'ako, downtown, a lot of things going on in that very congested area. What are you focused on for your residents?
Yeah, so I was kind of when the person was talking, I was thinking, answering that question, I was thinking that what's kind of what I kind of noticed over the past few years is that even in Hawaii, where you have really diverse kinds of communities, and proximity is always an issue that the concerns that we see in the different communities are kind of like they're all statewide concerns. They're not really always unique to the community, and we can learn from what is happening in other parts of the state. And I'll use Senate President as an example because for several years he worked on helping to implement the park registration and fee program at Hyannis State Park, and that has what has happened there is kind of like the model for what we can do in other locations throughout our state. So there's just some, themes that we can borrow from each other. So my district is District 25, and it's basically a high-rise district. It's all Kakako, but even though people live in high-rises that are secured for the most part, that are private, their concerns are like everyone else's in the state. Because when I hear from residents, they'll ask me about homelessness, affordability, crime, the condition of their sidewalks, the condition of the roads in front of their buildings. It's the same kind of concerns, and because the district is so compact or so dense, I think those concerns are sometimes they're kind of heightened, but yeah, it's similar concerns to other areas.
Okay, great. By the way, Civil Beat, a couple of us were on Lanai yesterday. We're doing these pop-up newsrooms in the community, and it was really wonderful. And I was genuinely surprised. You talk about how these are statewide problems. There is not a homeless population on Lanai. That was quite a surprise. Of course, it has a lot to do with a close-knit community of about 3,200, where you look out for each other. But that was really something I just wanted to point out. The last question in this round comes from Blaze to President Kouchi.
Yeah, we were wondering if you could get an update on some of the governor's cabinet appointments.
Yes, no, yes, no, no, yes.
You want to put names next to those?
Was that alphabetical?
No, the update, like I've said, there have been some of the nominees as they've been appearing in front of the committees that have had difficulty either answering the questions that are posed or articulating a clear vision that at least the committee members could understand. But rather than closing the door and saying, I'm not going to vote for this person, the committee has invited and offered to reschedule time, give them an opportunity to go back and work on the plans that they have, or maybe the delivery of their message, because we would like them to succeed. Everybody's here in trying to create a better Hawaii. But like the speaker talked about the First Amendment right, we are given the authority of advice and consent, not to be a rubber stamp, and not to just say, well, please confirm all of my people and say, sure, okay. The Senate takes its job very seriously in advise and consent. You can see by the questions they've asked, and if they've had to stay into the night, they've stayed for hours and asked the questions. Some of them are hard questions, and we take that role very seriously in confirming judges as well. And so there isn't anybody that I think isn't going to be confirmed today, because they all have a chance to come back and deliver a plan. Now, it will be self-evident to everybody who watches any of those meetings if somebody's going to have a difficult time or not by their ability to convey their message. And so certainly there are a few that, didn't do a good job the first time, but again, they're invited back, and we'll see how they do on the return visit.
They've definitely stayed far into the night on some of these meetings.
I guess you were covering the hearing.
And to name names, we're talking about Ikaika Anderson, the nominee for DHHL. We're talking about John Chang, if I have the name correct, Department of Land and Natural Resources. And I heard another candidate as well. I forget the other one that's coming up, but we don't need to hear directly on that. Blaze, why don't you take us into the reader's questions? The first one up is about OHA.
Sure, and just a reminder to the audience, if you have questions, write them down on a note card, raise your hand, one of our staff will come along and collect those. We've got a lot here already, but we'll be taking, a lot more. This first question, I think I'll ask the speaker, this is in your district actually, where do you stand on the OHA sponsored bill to allow them to build high-rise condos in the sensitive Kaka'ako-Makai land that they owned? This is the effort by the office to lift the zoning restrictions so that they can pursue residential development in the future.
Yeah, the president said he wants to answer that question.
And actually, I don't have a problem answering the question because it's not my district. If you asked me personally, I would like to get a better idea of what the plan is. I would not be completely shut out to that particular opportunity. But when I put my hat on as Senate President and I need to work with my caucus, then I need to be sensitive to the members who represent that area and would certainly sit and talk with them. But to get to the point where it's actually going to get approved, I think it's a pretty heavy lift at this point.
Speaker?
Yes, this is for background, in, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs acquired the Kaka'ako parcels in 2012 when they entered into a settlement agreement with the state. And at that time, those parcels were valued at about $200 million, based on the appraisals that were done. And at the time of that settlement agreement, there was a state law in place that banned residential development in Kaka'ako. And so through this, the bill that was just introduced is seeking to reverse that statute. So the question, the question is whether or not we should allow for, and I would say high-rise residential development in Kaka'ako, and whether we should basically be amending the settlement agreement that was executed in 2012. So, and as the president mentioned, I would also like to see the details for a specific proposal. I know that OA has spent a lot of time over this summer, a lot of time and money over this summer, holding public meetings to get input and to develop a plan. But I think that there's, I understand the state's obligation to OHA and to its beneficiaries. But I would treat this issue the same as I would if the land was owned by any other entity. So for example, if Howard Hughes owned these parcels, I would be asking the same questions. What are you gonna build? Who are you building it for? Will the public have access to this area? I do not want to see Kaka'ako turn into another Ko'olina, where you basically have structures surrounding the beach and one point of entry and a small parking lot for the public. I really feel that this space has to be maximized for public use. And so it's a hard question because this involves OHA, and the legislature is very supportive of OHA, as I mentioned, OHA and its beneficiaries. Last year, we approved legislation to appropriate to fulfill a back pay obligation to OHA. We also increased their annual appropriation for the public land trust revenue. So, but this is a complex issue because it involves, it's not just involving the question of making OHA whole, but it also involves the use, the public space and access and ocean access. So we'll see what happens. The bill hasn't been, the bill was just introduced a couple of days ago, and we'll see, we'll see what happens if the session.
Was it Alexander Baldwin back in the day that tried to get high
Yes.
rises built there too?
Yeah, 2005,
Okay.
2006.
OCCC, this is also from a reader. When is the new OCCC, the jail here on Oahu in Kalihi, going to be built? Crime is growing. That's to both of you.
I don't know. The new nominee to head public safety has said that they're basically going to go back and start again. And so I'm waiting for them to come back and say what their vision is.
Yeah, and there's also, we all know that if we build a facility, that it should be a multi-dimensional one that provides services to the inmates. the question that I always ask about a new facility is where are we gonna build it? Because the state has grappled with this question for decades, and whenever there's a proposal, the state can never find a location for it. So that, for me, that's always the first question, where are we gonna build it?
Okay, and there's a lot of issues related to whether we should just keep building new jails, prisons, and putting people in them, rather than just try to find ways to help folks rehabilitate and return to society. We're at the 1 hour mark, we have 30 minutes to go. Blaze, to you, what's
Yeah,
next?
we've actually got a couple reader questions on agriculture. The first one is, what is the legislature doing to protect local brands like Kona Coffee? I know none of you are from Kona.
Yeah, so we have, I saw a couple of bills introduced yesterday or the day before on labeling, again, the question of labeling Kona coffee. So that's something that we'll be considering this year as well.
And when I initially got to the Senate in 2011-12, I was on the Agriculture Committee, 13-14, vice chaired the committee. The reason why we haven't moved further in the Kona coffee issue specifically is there are two diverse opinions. For the high-end boutique coffee grower in Kona, they want the exclusivity of the brand, and it's a big deal. For the farmers who are raising coffee in Kona that don't have that kind of high grade, then they are dependent on having their beans bought and put into a blend that is referred to as Kona. And every time you get into the hearing, a civil war breaks out between the two differing viewpoints in Kona. And at least to date, the legislature has chosen not to change how we do it because there isn't a consensus about what is the right way to go. And I guess, for some of the smaller farmers who need that blended sales to survive, they've so far carried the day.
I'm going to go ahead and just see if we can skip over this next question, because I'm pretty sure we've heard from both of you on legalizing cannabis, not decriminalizing, as already exists for a certain amount. But correct me if I'm wrong, but both of you are, I think in particular, the Senate President is not particularly receptive to this idea of legalizing marijuana, pakalolo, for general use. We don't have to dwell on that one, is that correct? Okay, it will come up. This is my question then. When is this, actually not my question, again from the readers, when is the systematic, I don't know if they meant to say systemic, but systematic corruption in Hawaii government going to be addressed? Why are you laughing?
You may go first.
That's your commission.
Yeah, so, last year, we did form a commission on to recommend changes, how we can improve standard of conduct, and that commission was chaired by Judge Dan Foley, and as you know, the commission issued a report in December. There were 31 recommendations in that report. The president and I both introduced all of those recommendations. They haven't been scheduled for hearing yet with the House. I think the House lead chair will probably be the Judiciary Chair, Representative Tarnas, and so he'll be scheduling those for public hearing, and we'll get some input on those recommendations. I will note that when the commission held hearings on these proposals over the summer, there were some proposals that where there was some opposition from members of the public, and there were some recommendations that were not, when the commission voted, were not unanimous votes. There were some split votes. So we'll see how the public, how the hearings go this year.
And the reason why I wound up co-sponsoring with the speaker, I had a champion who wanted to introduce them all, and then through some snafu or another, missed the 5 o'clock deadline on Friday for unlimited bill introductions for the senators. And so they came to me on Monday morning and said, can you please sign this because the president can still introduce above the mandatory minimum for all members? And I said, sure, get the bills to me. And so I just signed them this yesterday afternoon when I came back after Princess Kawananako's.
I mean, that's the
Funeral
kind of
service.
thing that if someone in the public might go, what? You missed a deadline on bills dealing with corruption. You're saying you had the opportunity on Monday. And
Well, but
took
through
it.
the drafting and everything, the
Okay.
individual member who wanted to do it didn't get it there in time, but
Okay.
they knew that I was the, fallback, and so I signed the bills. The other thing though is that, quietly, to no fanfare on Thursday in our rules, and not just by saying it out loud that we're going to do it, we put into our rules that we'll continue to hold that hybrid system of hearing. And the best way to shine light on is to get more people involved and seeing how the process works. I think, in COVID, what are the opportunities? Clearly this hybrid system and the ability to stream all hearings of the legislature is a great outcome. In the past, we'd say in this hour with Olelo, this is, I think, the most important or interesting hearing in this bracket, but they could only show one at a time, and now anybody can go back, archive, and take a look at it. And then we're going to announce shortly, I hope within the next week, that we're going to be posting the expenditure of the allowances online. The city council is already doing it, and that was one of the things that the
Yeah, those are
commission
things that were
discussed.
mentioned in the Foley Commission. I just have to have a follow-up. It's been not quite a year, and help me if I have the calendar wrong, but I want to say it was February. Jay Kalani English and Ty Cullen, the bribery, admitting that they basically killed legislation for bribes. It's not just confined to English, the former majority leader, or Cullen, the former vice chair of the House Finance Committee. We've seen what's happening with the Department of Planning and Permitting, Maui County. Don't get me started on the Kealohas and kind of Cheryl and so forth. How do you feel as leaders of this building, almost a year from now since that shocking news happened? What do you say to people out there worried about wanting to trust what you guys are doing here?
The only way is to prove what you're about. And, I've said it at the end of last session. In the 12 years I've been here, and at that point it was the 6th session that I was serving as president, I have never been able to do everything I said I was going to do on opening day until last year. And with the speaker, with the leadership of Finance Chair Luke, Ways and Means Chair Dela Cruz, they exceeded what I said on opening day. And so I hope that we're going to be better than last year. And that's the only way I can think of trying to assure the public that we're here and we're working on outcomes that are in the best interests of the people in Hawaii. And I think if we live up to what the speaker and I talked about at the beginning, if we do the things that the governor talked about yesterday, then we will have lived up to that commitment, and then it's up to the people to decide.
The governor's saying he will happily sign whatever comes out of the Foley Commission and others if it makes it to his desk. Speaker?
So, I think that what happened last year was a total wake-up call for the members. I just clearly recall that the day that the news broke about English, that the House, we were in a House floor session when we started getting the breaking news on our phones, and everybody was in shock. And then after the floor session ended, just like 10 minutes later, I went up back to my office, and there was a letter waiting for me from Representative Cullen resigning from the House, resigning his House seat. And at that point, I didn't even know that he was involved with this. And so, everybody was in shock. I have to say that, what happened was, and I'm making excuses, but, that's the exception, because there are so many members of the legislature who work so hard and who are ethical and who follow the law and who are tainted by what happened. But having said that, I think everybody has learned from that incident. I believe that members are extra careful now about their conduct, and we've learned from this, and that's why, that's one reason why we wanted to form this commission, to bring in independent people who could make recommendations for us. And that's, that was, but again, we learned from this, and we know that this system doesn't work if we don't have, if there's no public confidence in us.
Blaze.
I actually just have a quick aside on public corruption, because it actually happened here and I still think it's a funny story. So the last panel event that Civil Beat had was in March 2020, and one of our panelists was Jay Kalani English. And towards the end, Chad, I don't know if you remember this, but you asked him, Senator, do legislators act ethically? And he said resoundingly, yes, Chad, next question.
Well, thank you for reading Civil Beat.
And that just stuck with me, and it was funny then, but it's even funnier now given what happened. Anyway, moving on.
I want to say thank you both to the president and the speaker for speaking frankly about these issues. Go ahead, Blaze.
So this is another reader question. Dr. Chip Fletcher from the university has shown an impact from sea level rise on maps. What will you do to prepare impacted areas of our islands? Appropriate funds, adopt programs, or what are some other solutions?
Well, we already started a couple of, I'm not sure how many years ago it was, but we've required that environmental impact statements include an assessment of sea level rise. We're working on funding projects with the Department of Transportation for on roadway road mitigation. I know that there's a lot of other areas that we need to work on, but I think we've taken some initial steps in that direction.
We're getting into the last 15 minutes or so, and we've tried to get to as many questions as possible. This is topical, given what we've seen, unfortunately, in Monterey Park and Half Moon Bay and Des Moines. Shocking 3 mass murders, just in 24 hours, 2 of them in California. This is from a reader. Hawaii currently has the 2nd lowest gun violence rate in the US, thanks to our strong gun laws, but the US Supreme Court ruling struck down an important part of our law, and as a result, more people are getting permits to carry guns out in public. Blaze had a story actually today on this. This is something we've never dealt with before in our state, says this reader. We have seen how widespread firearm carry in other state drives up shootings and violence. That's from this reader. What is the legislature's plan to make sure that this doesn't happen here? Speaker and President.
So we have Hawaii has an A minus. It's either A minus or A rating from the Gabby Giffords Foundation, which tracks legislation in all of the states, and but there's always room for improvement. The Giffords Foundation had contacted my office over the summer, and their staff attorney was reviewing state laws and had some recommendations for Hawaii. So we did introduce those recommendations last week, and it included things like safe zones, those kinds of topics. So I think there are 3.
What would be an example of a safe zone where you just shouldn't carry a gun even though there's a concealed carry law in place?
Well, schools, parks, public places.
This building?
Capitol, absolutely. The Civil Beat office.
Oh my. Touche, Speaker.
So it's something that we take seriously, and there are going to be bills heard this year.
Yeah, and on the Senate side, Senator Rhodes, our judiciary chair, has been a champion in this area. Senator Nishihara with public safety also was a strong advocate. So we have a new public safety chair in Senator Wakai, but I know Senator Rhodes will be leading on this. But on opening day, I did say, bad people still do bad things no matter how tough our laws are here. So when the bad thing happens, what do we do to avoid it? And I suggest that I believe Senators Kidani and Dela Cruz are in the right direction as advocates for the first responder tech park out in Mililani, where you would have the ability for county, state, and federal law enforcement to train together, be housed together. When they did the assessment at Uvalde, one of the problems was multi-jurisdictional law enforcement on the premise and an inability for people to determine who should be in charge and who should make the call. And if we train together, we practice together, when the incident happens, then we will work together and we can prevent or save more lives in that way. But we need to train and be prepared and not just pass laws and tell everybody now behave. And I did say, the other day when I was zipping at 5:30 in the morning, getting my Starbucks, I went 37 in the 35-mile-an-hour zone. So we don't always obey the law. And so that's why I think the training is an important aspect of being prepared when something happens.
Yeah, and I will just say on a serious note regarding journalists, I think we all remember the shooting at that newspaper in Baltimore some years ago, a lot of people. So not to take that lightly at all.
And then for your young reader, the Xerox.
Yes,
Shooting still happened here.
I remember that.
Oh, there are other people my age in the audience.
Yeah, 7 people were killed
Yes.
by a coworker, Byron Suchi, I think, yeah. Quickly, there was a question about green fees for all travelers. I believe the president and the speaker addressed that somewhat, but I want to go to the next question for Blaze because we are getting near the end here. And which one would you like to take?
Yeah, actually, this is another reader question on taxes. What is the position of the Senate and the House regarding a constitutional amendment to enable the state to tax real property in addition to the counties?
That was an authority conveyed to the counties in the 1978 Constitutional Convention, to go about and do it differently. Having served for 22 years on the Kauai County Council, it's not something that I would favor. We have given the counties some other mechanisms to generate revenue, and in the process took back all of the TAT for us. So I think that we have ample revenue streams to run our operations, and the counties need to have predictable sources of revenue for them to plan well financially and as they go forward.
Yeah, I don't support that proposal. I don't believe that even if it was on the ballot, I'm assuming that the voters will reject it because it's another form of broad-based taxation. But at the same time, the counties, I hope that the counties will, will take on more financial responsibility within their counties. The state continues to subsidize a number of services that are really county-based, even things like ambulance service, which is it's a lot of money, and I think that the counties need to be more responsible using their own tax authority to pay for these kinds of services.
Question from our reader, this one probably goes to the senator from Kauai. With so much discussion around agriculture, why doesn't the state have an agricultural strategic plan? Do we have a strategic plan for agriculture? That's to whoever wishes to answer, but of course, Kauai has a lot of agriculture.
Well, I haven't met with the nominee for chair of the Ag Department, so that'll be the first question I ask. I know that we meet regularly on Kauai, and we do have a vision, and we are working on that plan and creating the systems of distribution procurement because of wanting to do that farm to school and the 3 hospitals. And then those systems were then put into place to help feed the community during COVID. And we had great system in place to take the philanthropic dollars, the county distributed money to assist in food distribution programs. And we just most recently did one in October, and unfortunately, it is still very much needed in our community. And so we're going to continue to do that work into this year.
We've been able to get to a lot of the questions. That's a rarity in these formats. That's terrific. We do have just a couple more. Blaze?
Yeah, this is about DHHL. Will the legislature be willing to give a one-time payment to DHHL beneficiaries? I'm assuming this question is about those who are still on the wait list. Senate President.
I'm gonna go first. Yeah, so we, 25 years ago, a class action lawsuit was filed against the state by beneficiaries who were on the waiting list, and it covered waitlisted people from between the year 1959 up to the year, I think it was 1993 or 1992. The legislature funded the settlement in that lawsuit last year. It was about a $325 million settlement. So we did fulfill our obligation, at least with respect to that group of waitlisted beneficiaries.
Told you as the attorney, he brings a unique skill that is very valuable.
A question on cesspools. Clearly a big problem on the Big Island. I suppose on Kauai there might be some challenges. You could set me straight on that.
Maui as well.
Maui too, thank you. Yeah, and here on Oahu, thank you. Well, then this
Okay,
question.
everywhere.
Everywhere, I should say it. Will the state, in fact, I believe we have the worst cesspool problem per capita in the nation. It's right up there. Will the state set aside funds for the conversion of cesspools? This is from readers, so, or will the financial burden fall solely on property owners? What is the state's rationale on this? I am not an expert on cesspools, but we do know we have a cesspool problem. What is the legislature doing about that?
So I'm going to begin by saying I agree with the speaker. And what I agree with the speaker on is that wastewater is a county function. The Department of Health enforces regulations for the EPA because they don't have the personnel to do it, but the sewer departments, the water departments are all run by the counties. And so I was a little surprised when I was asked this by someone else about potential legislation, and I asked, when did the counties abdicate that role to me? We do have a sewer revolving fund that comes from the federal government that the counties can borrow from. We are not able, under federal law, to convert monies that we would loan from the sewer revolving fund into a grant, but we can charge zero interest is permitted by the federal government. I happen to know about all of this because when we had the flooding on the north shore of Kauai in 2017, there were so many cesspools that failed in the Hanalei area. We were looking at ways to try to get that conversion. FEMA also has in the regulation that you cannot convert and upgrade private property. So they would work with any kind of governmental system, but they would not give any aid to private systems, which we looked at. So one of the ways in trying not to overly burden an individual by taking out the loan to convert to septic and all of that, is to perhaps have that fund utilized by the county, no interest on the loan, and then you have on-bill financing with their sewer water bill, so that you would be making monthly installments, but the county would have taken out the debt. So if you're on the fixed income, you don't have that looming threat of somebody leaning your property, hanging over your head. And toward that end, I'm happy as somebody who served on the Kauai County Council for 22 years to work with the counties to see what we could do. And then if there's another role for the state to play and the counties are stepping up, then I think, we could then begin to talk about it. But if you're just gonna ask us, what are we gonna do by ourselves, I don't see that as being the solution.
Got it. Did the president speak for the speaker?
Yeah, I totally agree with the president.
In his high-rise district, he didn't have that cesspool failure problem.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
A few years ago, we approved, I think it was was it a tax credit or exemption for?
10,000.
people want to replace their systems, and they're actually, it already expired, but there's really few takers on that.
You know, I think you were touching on something I'll just briefly bring up, but do you find, the both of you, that there is a general confusion among the public, what's a county issue and what's a state issue? Roads are another one, some of those roads are state, some of them are county.
It's also, what is the Senate, what is the House?
All right, we got one more question from Blaze, and then I just have some closing remarks.
Just some general thoughts from both of you on the Department of Agriculture budget. This reader is wondering if there's some appetite in the legislature to providing more assistance to local farmers or other initiatives to build up local supply chains.
Well, I think if they have a great agricultural master plan, then we could consider funding.
That's a good one. By the way, I did want to just check with both of you before I do close this out. Was there anything you didn't get to talk about that you'd like to say right now? An important point that you want to share with our audience, and we'll start with the speaker.
Well, I mean, I kind of alluded to it earlier. This is, you know, I feel that this is going to be a very positive year. I think that, you know, with the new governor in place, the Senate and the House working together with the governors, I think there's a very high likelihood that that's going to happen this year, because we know that there are some problems that we just need to take on.
President?
Well, one thing I talked about last year, and I was just amazed at what happened, was the Ma'i movement, or ending period poverty. And, you know, featured in Civil Beat and other news outlets was this incredible teacher, Sarah Milley at Ilima Intermediate, and she and her students came in the first year of COVID, introduced the bill, got no hearing, we had no money. Year two, they showed up again, the bill was still alive, no money, no hearing. And instead of giving up, they came back in year three, which was last year, and wound up getting $2 million appropriated. They hit a tipping point in this state. People were talking about it all over the place. And it turned out my daughter-in-law on Kauai was running one of the 6 pilots at Chiefess Kamakahele Middle School, and I learned so much from talking to her, so much in talking to Nikki Yee, one of the 3 sisters who started this. But the most important thing is not the fact that we provided the money and not the fact that we have products available in the schools, it's the normalization of the conversation. And people were made to feel ashamed, people were made to feel like something was wrong with them, and getting the boys and girls in school, when I visited schools with the students and normalizing that conversation. The dispensers are right out there in the middle of the classroom so that it's okay. If you need something, please come and get it. And, you know, we're discussing how do we expand this. And I was so focused on getting devices and connectivity for the students of Kauai, and I didn't realize how much class was being missed by young girls who could not afford feminine hygiene products. My daughter-in-law was quoted as saying, "Do you buy food or do you buy the products?" Then you had newspaper and leaves and other ways that they were dealing with it. And I choose to end with that because I still am working hard at normalizing the conversation. And I think as a guy who's willing to step forward and talk about it, that it's important for us to let them know that we're with you 100%.
That's a very positive note. I want to end with that. Thank you, President Kouchi, and thank you both, Ron Kouchi and House Speaker Scott Saiki, for joining us today. I'm sure all of us has found this very valuable. Thanks to all of you folks for joining us back at the Capitol for this event. Great to be back in the Capitol, although parking still has some challenges. There will be 2 more civil cafes following the legislature. We'll have one mid-session, check in, see how things are doing. That will be on March the 8th, probably in this very room, is that right? I'm guessing Alana's over there, thank you. And we'll have one at the end of session, a wrap-up. That will be on May 3rd, which is actually the day before you wrap things up, right? And it too will be here at the Capitol. Civil Beat, as a local nonprofit.